The weight of always giving. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm 34 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed that love meant sacrifice, that being a good daughter meant putting everyone else's needs before my own. I thought that if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, and stayed quiet enough, I would finally earn the respect and appreciation I desperately craved. It took me 3 decades to realize I was wrong. Growing up in San Francisco's Richmond district, I was the eldest of 3 children in a traditional Chinese-American household. My parents, David and Linda Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan in the early 80s with nothing but determination and a belief that education and hard work would secure their children's future. They opened a small grocery store that became the center of our universe, demanding 18-hour days and every ounce of family energy. From the age of 12, I was expected to help in the store after school and on weekends. While my younger siblings, Michael and Jessica, were allowed to participate in sports and clubs, I spent my afternoons restocking shelves, helping customers, and translating for my parents whose English, though functional, wasn't always sufficient for complex transactions. I told myself this was normal, that every immigrant family made these sacrifices. My parents never explicitly said they loved me less than my siblings, but the evidence was everywhere. Michael, 4 years younger, was the golden child whose every achievement was celebrated with elaborate dinners and proud phone calls to relatives. When he made the high school basketball team, my parents closed the store early to attend every game. Jessica, the baby of the family, charmed everyone with her quick wit and artistic talents. Her drawings covered our refrigerator, and my mother would beam when neighbors complimented her daughter's creativity. My accomplishments, by contrast, were expected rather than celebrated. When I graduated as valedictorian, my parents attended the ceremony but seemed more concerned about getting back to the store than acknowledging my achievement. When I received a full scholarship to UC Berkeley, their response was a satisfied nod and a reminder that now I could help even more with the family business during breaks. I convinced myself this was cultural, that Asian parents showed love through expectations rather than praise. I threw myself into my studies, majoring in business with the unspoken understanding that I would eventually take over the family store. During college, I worked 20 hours a week at various jobs, sending half my earnings home to help with household expenses. My parents never asked for this money, but I felt compelled to contribute, especially when I heard them arguing late at night about bills and declining sales. After graduation, instead of pursuing the corporate opportunities my degree had opened up, I returned home and began working full-time at the store. The plan was temporary, just until we could modernize the business and increase profits. That was 12 years ago. The grocery store consumed my 20s and early 30s. I implemented new inventory systems, negotiated better deals with suppliers, and gradually transformed our small neighborhood market into a thriving business. Sales increased by 40% under my management, and we were able to expand into the adjacent storefront. My parents were pleased with the results but somehow never connected them to my contributions. When Michael graduated college with a degree in computer science, my parents proudly announced his job offer at a tech startup in Seattle. They helped him with his security deposit and moving expenses, hosting a farewell party that half the neighborhood attended. Jessica, meanwhile, was pursuing her master's degree in fine arts, fully funded by my parents who believed supporting her artistic dreams was an investment in the family's cultural legacy. I watched from behind the cash register, genuinely happy for my siblings but quietly wondering when it would be my turn to pursue my own dreams. The question felt selfish, even thinking it. After all, someone had to keep the family business running, and I was good at it. My parents needed me. The pattern of financial dependence deepened after my father's heart attack 3 years ago. The medical bills were substantial, and business slowed during his recovery period. Without discussion, I began paying for his medications, the increased insurance premiums, and eventually took over the mortgage payments on our family home when my parents fell behind. I liquidated my own savings account and cancelled the vacation I had planned to finally visit Europe. My social life had long since withered. Friends from college had married, started families, and moved to suburbs I couldn't afford. Dating was nearly impossible given my 70-hour work weeks and emotional exhaustion. I had a few brief relationships over the years, but they invariably ended when partners realized I would always prioritize my family's needs over our relationship. The one person who consistently challenged me was my closest friend from college, Amanda Rodriguez. She had built a successful marketing career in Los Angeles and couldn't understand my devotion to what she called a family that treats you like an employee rather than a daughter. "Sarah, you're brilliant and capable," she would say during our monthly phone calls. "You could be running a corporation instead of a corner store. You could have your own life, your own family. When was the last time your parents asked what you wanted?" I would deflect these conversations, changing the subject to her career or dating life. The truth was too painful to acknowledge. I couldn't remember the last time anyone in my family had asked about my desires, my dreams, or even my basic well-being. I existed to serve their needs, and questioning that role felt like betraying everything they had sacrificed for me. The warning signs of deeper dysfunction had been accumulating for months before the final betrayal. My parents had been having hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Michael had visited more frequently, spending long hours in private discussions with our father. Jessica had been unusually attentive, calling weekly instead of monthly and asking pointed questions about the store's finances. I attributed this increased family engagement to concern about Dad's health and the business's future. It never occurred to me that I might be the subject of their planning rather than a participant in it. The revelation came on a Tuesday evening in March. I had stayed late to process inventory when I heard voices in the back office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear my parents talking with Michael, who was visiting from Seattle. I approached quietly, intending to join the conversation, when I heard my father say, "We need to be realistic about Sarah's situation. She's 34 and still single. It's unlikely she'll marry at this point." My mother's voice was gentle but matter-of-fact. "She's always been so focused on the store. Maybe it's better this way. She doesn't seem interested in having her own family." "The question is," Michael's voice was clear and businesslike, "what happens to the store when you and Mom retire? Sarah's been running it for years, but legally, she has no ownership stake." I pressed closer to the door, my heart beginning to race. "We've been thinking about that," my father replied. "The store has become quite valuable, especially with the neighborhood gentrifying. We could sell it and use the money to help you and Jessica with your futures. Sarah doesn't need the money like you two do. She has no dependents, no mortgage, no real expenses." The words hit me like a physical blow. 12 years of my life, 12 years of sacrificing my own dreams and opportunities, and they were discussing my future as if I weren't a person with my own needs and desires. "What about Sarah?" Michael asked, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope that someone was considering my perspective. "Sarah will be fine," my mother said with certainty. "She's practical and independent. She can find another job, maybe in an office somewhere. This might be good for her, force her to get out more, maybe finally meet someone. The timing makes sense," my father continued. "The business is at its peak value. Sarah has done a good job building it up. Now we can cash out and secure everyone's future." I stumbled backward from the door, my legs suddenly unsteady. They were planning to sell the business I had built, the business that had consumed my entire adult life, without even consulting me. Worse, they were framing it as a favor, as if forcing me to start over at 34 with no savings and no ownership stake was somehow beneficial to my social life. I drove around the city for hours that night, trying to process what I had heard. The Golden Gate Bridge was shrouded in fog, matching the haze of confusion and betrayal clouding my thoughts. How had I been so blind? How had I convinced myself that my parents valued my contributions when they clearly saw me as a convenient caretaker who could be discarded when no longer needed? The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 2 years. I needed time to think, to plan, to decide how to respond to this ultimate revelation of how little I mattered to the people I had spent my life serving. I made an appointment with Rachel Torres, a therapist Amanda had recommended months earlier when I had mentioned feeling burned out. I had been too busy then, too convinced that my family needed me to prioritize my own mental health. Now, sitting in her comfortable office overlooking Union Square, I poured out 34 years of accumulated pain and realization. "Sarah," Rachel said gently after I finished my story, "what you're describing is a pattern of emotional neglect and financial exploitation. Your parents may love you, but they've conditioned you to believe your worth is tied to your usefulness to them." The words stung because they rang so clearly true. I had been useful, indispensable even, but I had never been seen as a whole person with my own needs and dreams. "What would you want," Rachel asked, "if you knew your parents would be fine without you? If you didn't have to worry about taking care of them or the store, what would Sarah Chen want for her life?" I started crying before I could answer. It had been so long since anyone had asked me what I wanted that I wasn't sure I remembered. But slowly, buried under decades of duty and sacrifice, I found fragments of old dreams: traveling, maybe starting my own business, finding love, having children, owning a home that was truly mine. That evening, I returned to the store for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. My parents were surprised to see me after my day of absence, asking with what seemed like genuine concern if I was feeling better. The kindness in their voices made what I had to do even harder. "I heard you talking with Michael last night," I said without preamble. "About selling the store." The color drained from my father's face. My mother's hands fluttered nervously to her apron. Neither denied what I had heard. "Sarah, we were just discussing options," my father began. "Nothing's been decided." "Options that don't include the person who's been running the business for 12 years, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Options that assume I have no stake in something I've built with my own hands." "Honey, you've done wonderful work here," my mother interjected. "But you're still young. You have time to build your own life. Michael and Jessica, they're at different stages. Michael is 30 and makes 6 figures in tech. Jessica is 28 and has a graduate degree. I'm 34 with no savings because I've been supporting this family for over a decade. How exactly am I in a better position to start over?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could see them struggling to find justifications for their assumptions, to maintain the narrative that had allowed them to take my contributions for granted. "We never asked you to sacrifice your savings," my father said finally. "You chose to help with Dad's medical bills and the mortgage." "I chose to help because I thought we were a family," I replied. "I thought I was investing in our shared future. I didn't realize I was funding my own replacement." My mother began to cry, which normally would have prompted me to comfort her and apologize for causing pain. This time, I remained seated, waiting for them to acknowledge the enormity of what they had planned to do. "What do you want from us?" my father asked, his voice tired and defensive. "I want you to admit that what you were planning was wrong," I said. "I want you to acknowledge that I've sacrificed my entire adult life for this family and this business. And I want to discuss the future of the store like the equal partners we should have been all along." But even as I said the words, I knew the conversation was futile. The shocked expression on their faces told me everything I needed to know. They genuinely didn't understand why I was upset. In their minds, I was being selfish for expecting recognition or compensation for what they viewed as my natural role in the family. That night, I called Amanda and told her everything. "Come to Los Angeles," she said immediately. "I have a guest room, and there are marketing positions opening up at my company all the time. You have skills, Sarah. You've been running a business for 12 years. Any corporation would be lucky to have you." For the first time in my adult life, I seriously considered leaving my family behind. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The next few weeks passed in a strange limbo. I continued working at the store while secretly updating my resume and researching jobs in other cities. My parents acted as if our confrontation had never happened, maintaining a careful politeness that felt worse than open conflict. They were waiting, I realized, for me to return to my previous compliant state, to accept my role and stop making uncomfortable demands. The final straw came when Jessica called to tell me she was engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Daniel, and that they were planning a destination wedding in Hawaii. The ceremony would cost $40,000, she explained, and she hoped the family could help with expenses since Daniel's family was contributing to their down payment on a house in Portland. "It's so exciting," she gushed over the phone. "Mom and Dad are already talking about taking out a loan against the store to help pay for everything. They want to make sure it's perfect." I hung up the phone and sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the stack of bills on my kitchen table. Bills for my father's medications, for the increased insurance premiums, for the small business loan I had personally guaranteed when we expanded the store. My parents were planning to mortgage the business I had built to pay for Jessica's wedding while simultaneously planning to sell it without giving me any ownership stake. The next morning, I walked into the store and found my parents discussing catering options for the wedding reception. They looked up expectantly when I entered, as if assuming I would want to help plan an event they expected me to fund but not truly participate in. "I'm resigning," I said simply. My mother laughed, thinking I was joking. My father frowned, clearly not understanding what I meant. "I'm quitting," I clarified. "I'm moving to Los Angeles. Amanda has helped me get interviews with 3 companies. I'll work through the end of the month to help you transition, but after that, you'll need to find someone else to run the store." The shock on their faces would have been comical if the situation weren't so heartbreaking. After 12 years of taking my presence for granted, they couldn't conceive of me actually leaving. "Sarah, you can't be serious," my father said. "This is your life. This is your family." "No," I replied, feeling a strength I didn't know I possessed. "This is your business that I've been running for you. My life is what I'm going to build for myself." The arguments that followed were predictable. How could I abandon the family business? What about their retirement plans? What about my father's health? What about the community relationships I had built over the years? Not once did they ask what I wanted or needed. Not once did they express concern for my future or acknowledgement of my contributions. Their outrage was entirely focused on how my departure would inconvenience them. My mother tried emotional manipulation, crying and claiming I was destroying the family. My father attempted logical arguments about duty and responsibility. Michael flew in from Seattle to add his voice to their chorus of disapproval, arguing that I was being selfish and short-sighted. Jessica was the most hurtful. She accused me of timing my departure to ruin her wedding plans, of being jealous of her happiness, of never supporting her dreams the way she had supported mine. The irony was so profound I almost laughed. When, exactly, had anyone in my family supported my dreams? But with each argument, each attempt to guilt me back into submission, my resolve strengthened. I had spent 34 years trying to earn love through service, and I finally understood that love earned through sacrifice isn't love at all, it's transaction. 3 weeks before my planned departure, Amanda flew up from Los Angeles to help me pack and drive down with me. She took one look at my tiny studio apartment with its second-hand furniture and nearly empty refrigerator and shook her head in amazement. "This is how you've been living while supporting an entire family?" she asked. "Sarah, I've seen college dorm rooms with more personality." She was right. I had been so focused on funding everyone else's dreams that I had never invested in my own basic comfort. I owned almost nothing of value, had no art on the walls, no books on shelves I couldn't afford to buy. I had been existing rather than living. The moving process was surprisingly simple given how little I had accumulated. Most of my possessions fit in Amanda's SUV with room to spare. As we loaded the last box, my mother appeared on the sidewalk, having walked the 6 blocks from the store. "Sarah, please," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't leave like this. We can work things out. We can talk about giving you a stake in the business." For a moment, I wavered. The little girl inside me who had spent decades seeking approval almost buckled at the first sign of recognition. But I had learned too much about myself and my family's dynamics to fall back into old patterns. "Mom, you've had 12 years to work things out," I said gently. "You've had 12 years to recognize my contributions or ask about my needs. The only reason you're offering now is because I'm leaving." She continued to plead as we drove away, promising changes she had never considered making before I threatened to leave. I watched her shrinking figure in the side mirror and felt simultaneously heartbroken and liberated. The drive to Los Angeles took us through some of the most beautiful landscape in California. As we passed through the Central Valley and over the Grapevine, I felt like I was seeing the world with new eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was moving towards something I wanted rather than away from something I feared losing. Amanda had been generous beyond measure, not only offering me a place to stay but using her network to arrange interviews with companies that could use my experience in business operations and customer relations. Within 2 weeks of arriving in Los Angeles, I had 3 job offers. I chose a position with a mid-sized retail consultancy that helped small businesses optimize their operations. The irony wasn't lost on me. I would be using the skills I had developed running my family's store to help other family businesses succeed. But this time, I would be properly compensated for my expertise and recognized for my contributions. The salary was more than I had ever imagined earning. After 12 years of subsistence living, having money left over after paying for necessities felt almost surreal. I rented a small but sunny apartment in Santa Monica, within walking distance of the beach. For the first time in my life, I furnished a space according to my own tastes rather than inherited necessity. The adjustment to my new life wasn't without challenges. I had to learn to make decisions based on my own preferences rather than my family's needs. Simple choices like what to eat for dinner or how to spend Saturday afternoon required conscious thought. I had been operating in service mode for so long that autonomous living felt foreign. Rachel had referred me to a therapist in Los Angeles, Dr. Maria Santos, who specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting. Our weekly sessions helped me understand the deep conditioning that had kept me trapped in a caretaker role for so long. "You were trained from childhood to believe your value came from your usefulness," Dr. Santos explained. "Breaking that pattern takes time and practice. Be patient with yourself as you learn to prioritize your own needs." The contact with my family gradually diminished to occasional text messages and holiday phone calls. My parents had hired a manager for the store, someone they actually paid a proper salary, which somehow made their treatment of me even more glaring in retrospect. Michael returned to Seattle after helping with the transition. Jessica's wedding proceeded as planned, funded by the business loan they had to take out without my financial contributions. I felt a complex mix of emotions about their struggles. Part of me wanted to rescue them, to return to my old role as problem solver and financial safety net. But a larger part of me recognized that their difficulties were the natural consequences of depending too heavily on one person's unpaid labor. They needed to learn to function without exploiting my sense of duty. 6 months after my move to Los Angeles, I met David Kim at a work conference. He was a financial advisor who had built his own practice after leaving a toxic family business situation similar to mine. Our shared understanding of family loyalty gone wrong created an immediate connection that deepened into genuine affection. Dating David felt like discovering a new language. He was interested in my thoughts, my goals, my experiences beyond what I could do for him. He celebrated my professional successes and supported me through moments of doubt. For the first time, I experienced a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care. The first Christmas I spent away from my family was difficult. I flew back to San Francisco for a brief visit, staying in a hotel rather than at home. The dynamic remained unchanged. My parents and siblings seemed to be waiting for me to return to my old role, to apologize for leaving and resume my position as family caretaker. When I mentioned my new job, my relationship with David, and my plans to buy a condo in Santa Monica, they listened with polite disinterest. When Jessica talked about her new house and Michael described his latest promotion, the conversation became animated and engaged. The contrast was so stark it would have been painful if I hadn't already accepted the reality of their priorities. I left after 2 days instead of the week I had planned, feeling sad but not surprised by the unchanged family dynamic. Some relationships, I was learning, couldn't be fixed through individual growth if the other parties weren't willing to examine their own behavior. A year and a half after leaving San Francisco, I received a call from Michael that our father had suffered another heart attack. This one was more serious, requiring surgery and an extended hospital stay. The old Sarah would have dropped everything to rush home and take charge of the crisis. The new Sarah offered appropriate support. I sent flowers, called regularly to check on his progress, and offered to help with specific needs, but I didn't abandon my own life to become the family crisis manager. "We really need you here," Michael said during one of our calls. "Mom can't handle everything by herself, and the store is suffering without proper management. Have you considered hiring someone?" I asked. "There are plenty of qualified business managers who could help during Dad's recovery." "It's not the same," he replied. "You know the business, you know the customers. You care about it in a way an employee never would." "You're right," I agreed. I did care about it. I cared so much I sacrificed 12 years of my life for it. But caring wasn't enough to earn me a stake in the business or even consideration in decisions about its future. The conversation ended awkwardly, as most of our family communications did now. They wanted my help but couldn't acknowledge why I had withdrawn it. I wanted their recognition and respect but couldn't continue giving without receiving basic appreciation in return. My father recovered from his surgery, though the doctors warned that stress could trigger future cardiac events. I suggested they consider selling the store and retiring, using the proceeds to fund a comfortable retirement without the daily pressures of business management. The suggestion was met with the same resistance they had shown to all my opinions. They wanted the financial security the store provided but not the responsibility of running it properly without my unpaid labor. 2 years after my move to Los Angeles, David proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. As he knelt in the vineyard where we had shared our first vacation together, I felt overwhelmed by the difference between this relationship and the family dynamics I had left behind. David saw me as a complete person worthy of love and respect. He valued my opinions, celebrated my successes, and wanted to build a future together based on mutual support and shared dreams. Planning our wedding became an exercise in creating the celebration we wanted rather than managing other people's expectations. We chose a small ceremony in Santa Barbara with close friends and selected family members. I invited my parents and siblings, though I wasn't surprised when they declined to attend, citing the expense and inconvenience of travel. Their absence hurt, but it also clarified something important. I no longer needed their approval to validate my choices or their presence to make my life meaningful. I had built a support network of friends and colleagues who genuinely cared about my happiness, and I had found a partner who chose me not for what I could do for him but for who I was as a person. The wedding was beautiful and small and entirely our own. Amanda served as my maid of honor, and David's best friend from college officiated the ceremony. As we exchanged vows overlooking the Pacific Ocean, I felt a peace I had never experienced in my family home. This was what love looked like when it wasn't conditional on service or sacrifice. David and I bought a house in Venice Beach, a small craftsman with a garden where I could grow the vegetables and herbs I had learned to love during my years working in the family store. Cooking became a source of joy rather than obligation, and I discovered I had inherited my mother's talent for creating delicious meals from simple ingredients. My career continued to flourish as I developed expertise in helping family businesses navigate the complex dynamics that often undermine their success. My own experience had given me unique insight into the emotional and financial patterns that could destroy both businesses and relationships. I found deep satisfaction in helping other families avoid the mistakes mine had made. 3 years after leaving San Francisco, I received a letter from my mother that was different from her previous communications. Instead of updates about the store or complaints about my absence, she wrote about her own reflections on our family patterns. "I've been thinking about how we treated you," she wrote. "I always told myself we were being practical, that someone had to run the store and you were so good at it. But I realize now that we took advantage of your sense of duty. We expected you to sacrifice your dreams for ours without ever asking if that's what you wanted." The letter continued with acknowledgments I had waited decades to hear. She recognized that they had undervalued my contributions, that they had planned major decisions without including me, and that they had failed to support my individual goals the way they had supported Michael's and Jessica's. I don't expect forgiveness, she concluded. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand why you left, and I'm proud of the life you've built for yourself. I cried reading her words, not from sadness but from relief. The validation I had sought for so long had finally come, not because I had demanded it but because she had grown enough to offer it freely. The letter didn't repair our relationship overnight, but it opened a door to the possibility of future healing. David and I had been married for 2 years when we decided to start trying for children. The pregnancy came easily, as if my body had been waiting for the right circumstances to nurture new life. As I felt our daughter growing inside me, I reflected on the kind of parent I wanted to be. I was determined to see my children as individuals with their own dreams and talents rather than extensions of my own needs or unfulfilled ambitions. I wanted to support their individual paths while teaching them the value of healthy relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Elena Chin Kim was born on a sunny Tuesday morning in March, exactly 4 years after I had overheard my parents planning to sell the family store without consulting me. Holding her in my arms, I felt the full circle of my journey from sacrificial daughter to empowered mother. This little girl would grow up knowing she was loved for who she was, not for what she could provide. My parents flew down to meet their granddaughter when Elena was 6 weeks old. The visit was tentative but warmer than our previous interactions. They were clearly trying to rebuild our relationship, asking about my work and complimenting the home David and I had created together. Watching my mother hold Elena, I saw genuine love and wonder in her eyes. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She looks like you did as a baby." "I hope she'll be stronger than I was," I replied. "I hope she'll know her worth doesn't depend on how much she gives up for others." My mother looked at me with understanding. "She will be. You'll make sure of that." The store had eventually been sold to a local family who appreciated its history and community connections. My parents used the proceeds to buy a small condo in Chinatown and establish a modest retirement fund. The financial pressure that had driven so many of their decisions was finally relieved, allowing space for more authentic relationships. Michael had married his longtime girlfriend and started a family in Seattle. Distance had given him perspective on our family dynamics, and he began reaching out more regularly, not for favors or crisis management but for genuine connection. Jessica had settled into married life in Portland, though her relationship with money remained complicated. She no longer expected family members to fund her lifestyle, but she hadn't yet learned to manage her finances independently. 5 years after leaving San Francisco, I returned for my father's 70th birthday celebration. The party was held at a community center in Chinatown, surrounded by the friends and neighbors who had watched our family grow over the decades. Instead of working behind the scenes to organize everything, I attended as a guest, bringing my daughter to meet the extended community that had shaped my childhood. The evening felt like a reconciliation not just with my family but with my own history. I could see my past clearly now, the love that had been present but expressed through expectations rather than acceptance, the cultural values that had shaped my parents' choices, and the ways we had all been trapped by narrow definitions of duty and success. As I watched Elena toddle around the party, charming everyone with her bright smile and fearless curiosity, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain of my earlier years hadn't been erased, but it had been transformed into wisdom and strength. David found me on the balcony as the party wound down, Elena asleep in his arms. "How are you feeling?" he asked, knowing this return to my family's world brought complex emotions. "Grateful," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "Grateful for the pain that taught me to value myself, grateful for the courage to leave when staying would have destroyed me, and grateful for the life we've built together." He kissed my forehead, understanding without explanation the significance of this moment. We had both learned that sometimes loving someone means setting boundaries, that sometimes the greatest gift you can give a family is refusing to enable their dysfunction. As we drove through the city where I had spent my first 34 years, I pointed out landmarks to Elena, who was too young to understand but seemed to enjoy the rhythm of my voice. The grocery store where I had spent 12 years of my life was now a trendy market specializing in organic produce. The neighborhood had gentrified around it, but the bones of the community remained. I no longer felt angry about the years I had lost to misplaced loyalty or bitter about the opportunities one had missed while serving my family's needs. Those experiences had taught me the difference between healthy giving and self-sacrifice, between love and exploitation, between family loyalty and enabling dysfunction. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve slowly. We spoke regularly by phone, and they visited Los Angeles twice a year to spend time with Elena. The conversations were lighter now, focused on current events and family updates rather than crises that needed solving. They had learned to manage their own problems, and I had learned to offer support without sacrificing my own well-being. The family business was thriving under its new owners, who had modernized operations while maintaining the community connections that made it special. Sometimes I walked past during visits to San Francisco, pleased to see customers I recognized from my years behind the counter. The new owners had installed proper point-of-sale systems and hired adequate staff, investments my parents had resisted making during my tenure. Elena grew into a confident toddler with her father's analytical mind and my determination. Watching her assert her preferences and advocate for her needs filled me with joy and relief. She would never doubt her worth or believe she had to earn love through service. David and I were committed to raising her with strong boundaries and clear communication about feelings and needs. When Elena was 3, David and I welcomed our son, Marcus, whose arrival completed our small family in ways I hadn't anticipated. Holding him in the hospital room where my parents had visited to meet their new grandson, I reflected on the profound changes in my life over the 7 years since I had left San Francisco. I had built a career that utilized my skills while respecting my boundaries. I had found love that enhanced rather than diminished my sense of self. I had created a family based on mutual respect and individual growth. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my own judgment and prioritize my own needs without guilt. The work of healing family relationships is never complete, but it becomes easier when all parties are committed to growth and change. My parents had done their own work to understand the patterns that had damaged our relationship, and I had learned to appreciate their love while maintaining healthy boundaries. During Elena's 4th birthday party in our Venice Beach backyard, I watched 3 generations of our family playing together in a way that felt both familiar and completely different from my childhood experiences. My parents delighted in their grandchildren without the undertone of expectation that had colored their parenting. They offered help when asked and respected our decisions as parents without trying to control outcomes. The conversation during dinner touched on the old days, including stories about the grocery store and memories of my childhood. But instead of the selective nostalgia that had once characterized these discussions, there was honest acknowledgement of both the love and the mistakes that had shaped our family. Sarah was always such a hard worker, my mother said, watching Elena carefully arrange her birthday cake. Sometimes I think we relied on that too much when she was young. It was a small admission, but it represented years of growth and reflection. The mother who had once dismissed my concerns as selfishness had learned to see the cost of her expectations. I'm proud of the woman she became, my father added, even if it meant she had to leave us to become her. These moments of recognition no longer carried the desperate weight they would have had in my 20s and 30s. I no longer needed their validation to confirm my worth, which paradoxically made it easier to receive their acknowledgments with genuine appreciation rather than resentful satisfaction. As the evening wound down and we cleaned up the party remnants, David and I worked together with the easy coordination of true partnership. Elena and Marcus helped by carrying paper plates to the recycling bin, already learning that family responsibilities should be shared rather than shouldered by one person. I want to have a party like this when I'm old, Elena announced, apparently having decided that turning 4 qualified her as elderly. What kind of party would you want? I asked, genuinely curious about her vision. With chocolate cake and all my friends and nobody. Has to work, she said with the clarity that only children possess. Just fun and cake and laughing. Her innocent words struck me profoundly. She had unknowingly articulated what had been missing from so many family gatherings of my youth, the simple joy of being together without underlying obligations or unspoken expectations. I kissed the top of her head, silently promising that her childhood would be filled with exactly that kind of celebration. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, I found myself in Elena's room, watching her sleep. David appeared in the doorway, understanding my need for these quiet moments of reflection. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "How different her life is going to be," I replied. "How she'll never question whether she's worthy of love just because she exists. How she'll never have to choose between her dreams and her family's approval." David joined me beside Elena's bed, and we stood together watching our daughter's peaceful sleep. "She's going to have challenges," he said. "Every life has them. But she'll face them knowing she has parents who see her as a complete person, not a solution to their problems." The wisdom in his words reminded me why I had fallen in love with him. David understood that good parenting meant preparing children to live their own lives, not training them to serve their parents' needs. He had grown up in a family that, while not perfect, had given him a strong sense of his own worth and the tools to build healthy relationships. 8 years after leaving San Francisco, I received an unexpected call from my former family doctor, Dr. Patricia Wong, who had cared for our family for decades. She was calling to tell me that she had included my story, with identifying details changed, in a presentation about family dynamics and health outcomes for a medical conference. "I've seen so many patients over the years who were suffering from what I now recognize as caregiver burnout," she explained. "Young adults, particularly daughters, who sacrifice their own health and futures to meet family expectations. Your situation helped me understand the medical implications of these family patterns." The conversation led to an invitation to speak at a workshop for healthcare providers about recognizing and addressing family dynamics that contribute to mental health issues. Standing before a room of doctors, nurses, and social workers, I shared my story not as a victim seeking sympathy but as someone who had found a path to healing and wanted to help others recognize similar patterns in their patients. "The signs are often subtle," I explained to the audience. "Patients who consistently prioritize others' needs over their own health, who have no personal goals beyond family obligations, who seem to have no identity outside their caretaking role. These aren't character strengths, they're symptoms of a dysfunctional family system." The questions and discussions that followed revealed how common my experience was. Healthcare providers shared stories of patients who reminded them of my journey, and several mentioned that they recognized similar patterns in their own families. The workshop led to invitations to speak at other conferences and eventually to a part-time consulting role helping family therapy practices understand the business and financial aspects of family dysfunction. This work became a passion project that complemented my primary career in retail consulting. I discovered that the skills I had developed running my family's business, understanding complex systems, mediating conflicts, managing resources, translated perfectly to helping families create healthier dynamics around money, responsibility, and mutual support. One case that particularly moved me involved the Nguyen family, recent immigrants from Vietnam who had built a successful restaurant but were struggling with familiar patterns of exploitation disguised as family duty. The eldest daughter, Lynn, had dropped out of college to manage the restaurant while her younger siblings pursued professional degrees. The parents genuinely loved all their children but had unconsciously recreated the same dynamic that had trapped me for so many years. Working with the Nguyen's over several months, I helped them see how their current arrangement was unsustainable and ultimately harmful to everyone involved. Lynn was burning out at 26, resentful of her siblings' opportunities but unable to voice her feelings without seeming ungrateful. The younger siblings felt guilty about their privileges but were afraid to address the inequality directly. Through family meetings and individual sessions, we developed a plan that allowed Lynn to return to school while the family hired professional management for the restaurant. The parents learned to see their daughter as an individual with her own dreams rather than a built-in business manager. Lynn learned to advocate for her needs without guilt. The family relationships improved dramatically once the burden of unequal expectations was lifted. "You saved our family," Mrs. Nguyen told me at our final session. "Not by keeping us together the way we were, but by helping us become better for each other." These words stayed with me because they captured something essential about healthy family relationships. Love sometimes requires letting go of old patterns, even when those patterns feel familiar and safe. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is refusing to enable their dysfunction and modeling what healthy boundaries look like. Marcus grew into a thoughtful child who shared his sister's strong sense of self but expressed it more quietly. Where Elena was bold and outspoken, Marcus was observant and diplomatic. Watching them develop their individual personalities without pressure to conform to family expectations filled me with daily gratitude for the path I had chosen. When Elena was 6 and Marcus was 3, we decided to take a family trip to Taiwan to connect the children with their cultural heritage. My parents joined us for part of the journey, and I was struck by how different this travel experience was from the family dynamics of my childhood. Instead of my taking responsibility for all the planning and logistics, we shared the work according to our interests and abilities. My father, who spoke fluent Mandarin, handled communication with local guides. My mother, who had maintained connections with distant relatives, arranged family visits. David managed our transportation and accommodations. I coordinated activities that would interest the children. The trip allowed Elena and Marcus to understand their grandfather's stories about growing up in Taiwan and their grandmother's memories of the difficult decision to emigrate. But the history was shared as family legacy rather than obligation, as stories that enriched their understanding of themselves rather than expectations they would be required to fulfill. One evening in Taipei, as we walked through the night market where my father had worked as a teenager, he pointed out the stall where his family had sold noodles to support themselves. I wanted so much more for my children, he told Elena, who was riding on his shoulders. Sometimes I forgot that having more opportunities meant they should get to choose how to use them. It was perhaps the most direct acknowledgement he had ever made of the pressure he had placed on me to fulfill his dreams rather than my own. Elena was too young to understand the significance of his words, but I felt another piece of healing settle into place. The relationship with my siblings continued to evolve as we all matured and developed our own families. Michael had learned from watching my experience and was careful to maintain boundaries with his own parents and in-laws. His children grew up knowing their uncle and aunt in Los Angeles, but without the burden of feeling responsible for maintaining family unity across geographic distance. Jessica's marriage had stabilized as she learned to manage her finances and expectations more realistically. Her artistic talents had found expression in freelance graphic design work that provided both creative fulfillment and practical income. She visited us occasionally with her husband, and these visits were pleasant but appropriately limited. We had learned to enjoy each other's company without the undercurrent of unresolved resentment that had characterized our relationship for so many years. When Elena turned 7, she asked me directly about why we lived so far from Grandma and Grandpa when some of her friends saw their grandparents every week. It was a moment I had been preparing for, knowing that someday I would need to explain our family's history in age-appropriate terms. Sometimes families need space to learn how to love each other better, I told her. Grandma and Grandpa and I had some problems when I was growing up, and we all needed time to figure out how to fix them. Now we have a good relationship, but it's different from families who never had those problems. Did they not love you enough? She asked with the direct curiosity of childhood. They loved me, but they didn't always know how to show it in ways that felt good to me, I replied. Sometimes people need to learn better ways to love each other, and that takes practice. Elena seemed satisfied with this explanation, and the conversation moved on to other topics. But I was grateful for the opportunity to model honest communication about family challenges without burdening her with adult complexities she wasn't ready to understand. My career continued to flourish as I developed a reputation for helping family businesses navigate the intersection of personal relationships and professional responsibilities. The consulting firm where I worked promoted me to partner, recognizing both my business acumen and my unique expertise in family dynamics. The financial security this success provided felt surreal after so many years of barely scraping by while supporting my family. David and I were able to save for our children's education, plan for retirement, and pursue interests that brought us joy rather than just survival. I took art classes for the first time since high school, discovering a love for watercolor painting that provided a creative outlet completely separate from my professional identity. Our social circle expanded to include other couples who shared our values around family, work, and community involvement. Many of our friends were also immigrants or children of immigrants who had navigated the complex balance between honoring their heritage and creating their own path. These relationships provided models for how cultural identity could be preserved without sacrificing individual growth. 10 years after leaving San Francisco, I was invited to give the keynote address at a conference for adult children of immigrants. The topic was, Finding Your Voice in Families That Value Harmony Over Honesty, and the audience was filled with people who had struggled with similar issues to mine. Filial piety is a beautiful value, I told the audience, but like any virtue taken to extremes, it can become destructive. True respect for our parents includes refusing to enable patterns that hurt everyone involved, including them. The response was overwhelming. People lined up after my speech to share their own stories of family obligation gone wrong, of dreams deferred indefinitely, of the guilt and confusion that comes from loving people who seem to value your service more than your happiness. Many were still in the midst of their own struggles, trying to find the courage to set boundaries or pursue their own goals. I exchanged contact information with several audience members and began an informal network of mutual support for people navigating similar family dynamics. The network grew through word of mouth and social media, eventually becoming a small but active community of individuals committed to breaking generational patterns of dysfunction while maintaining their cultural connections. One woman who particularly moved me was Dr. Jennifer Liu, a physician who had sacrificed her specialty training to run her family's medical practice, only to be excluded from ownership decisions and treated as an employee rather than a family member. Her story was so similar to mine that we became close friends, supporting each other through the ongoing process of redefining family relationships. Sometimes I think my parents believe they're being generous by letting me work for them, Jennifer told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. They can't see that they're asking me to give up my medical career to subsidize their retirement. Through our friendship and the support network we had built, Jennifer eventually found the courage to establish her own practice. Her parents were initially hurt and angry, but over time they came to respect her decision and even refer patients to her when their practice couldn't accommodate certain specialties. Elena and Marcus grew into confident school-age children who understood that their family valued both individual achievement and mutual support. They saw their parents as people with our own interests and goals, not just as providers for their needs. This modeling, I hoped, would help them develop healthy relationships throughout their lives. When Elena was 9, she came home from school upset because a classmate had said it was weird that we lived so far from our extended family. "Why don't we live near Grandma and Grandpa like Emma's family does?" she asked. This time, I felt ready to share a more complete version of our story. When I was growing up, Grandma and Grandpa needed me to help them with their business, and I said yes because I wanted to be a good daughter, I explained. But after many years, I realized that helping them meant I couldn't build my own life. So I moved here to start fresh, and eventually we all learned how to have a better relationship. "Were you sad to leave them?" Elena asked. "Very sad," I admitted. But I was also excited to build the life I wanted. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices to become who we're meant to be. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Like when I decided not to take piano lessons anymore so I could have more time for soccer. Exactly like that, I laughed, amazed by her ability to find parallels between adult complexities and childhood decisions. Sometimes saying no to one thing means we can say yes to something that makes us happier. The annual performance reviews at my consulting firm consistently reflected my growth and contributions. My specialty in family business dynamics had become increasingly valuable as more companies recognized the importance of addressing relationship issues alongside operational challenges. I was invited to speak at business schools, write articles for trade publications, and consult with companies facing succession planning challenges. This professional recognition felt different from the acknowledgement I had once craved from my family. It was based on my actual contributions and expertise rather than my willingness to sacrifice for others. The validation was meaningful because it was earned through competence and integrity rather than compliance and self-denial. David and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary with a trip to Italy, leaving the children with their grandparents for the first time. The week away allowed us to reconnect as a couple and reflect on the decade we had built together. Our relationship had deepened through the challenges of parenting, career changes, and the ongoing process of healing my family relationships. "Do you ever regret leaving San Francisco?" David asked as we sat in a cafe overlooking the Tuscan countryside. "Never," I replied without hesitation. "I regret how long it took me to leave, but never the leaving itself. Everything good in my life started when I finally chose myself." The trip to Italy also allowed me to gain perspective on how much my relationship with my parents had genuinely improved. Their care for Elena and Marcus during our absence was attentive but appropriate, respecting the boundaries and routines we had established without trying to impose their own preferences. They called to check in once during the week but didn't demand constant contact or create drama around our absence. When we returned, the children were happy and well cared for, full of stories about cooking with Grandma and building puzzles with Grandpa. My parents had clearly enjoyed their time as grandparents without the complicated dynamics that had characterized their role as parents. "They were wonderful," my mother reported. "Elena helped me make dumplings, and Marcus learned to play Chinese checkers. We had a very nice week together." The simplicity of her report struck me. There were no underlying tensions to navigate, no sense that they had used the children to send messages to me or created situations designed to demonstrate their indispensability. They had simply enjoyed being grandparents, which was exactly what healthy family relationships should look like. As Elena approached her 10th birthday and Marcus turned 7, I found myself reflecting on what I wanted to pass on to them about resilience, boundaries, and family loyalty. They were developing into individuals with strong senses of self and clear ideas about their own interests and goals. But I also wanted them to understand the value of family connections and cultural heritage without feeling burdened by obligations they never chose. The conversation came naturally when Elena asked about family traditions and why we celebrated some holidays with extended family and others just as our immediate family. I explained that traditions should enhance our lives rather than constrain them, that we could honor our heritage while still making choices that reflected our own values and circumstances. "Some families stay very close and do everything together," I told her. "Other families spread out and stay connected in different ways. Neither is right or wrong, but each family has to figure out what works best for them." Marcus, who had been listening quietly, asked, "How do you know what works best?" "You pay attention to how you feel," I replied. "If family time makes you happy and energized, that's a good sign. If it makes you worried or tired or sad, that might mean something needs to change." These conversations felt like the most important parenting work I could do, teaching my children to trust their own feelings and make decisions based on their well-being rather than obligation or fear of disappointing others. 12 years after leaving San Francisco, I received an invitation that surprised me. The local Asian American Business Association wanted to honor me with an award for excellence in entrepreneurship and community leadership. The recognition was for my work helping family businesses improve their operations and relationships, but it also acknowledged my journey from family caretaker to independent professional. The award ceremony was held in San Francisco, bringing me back to the city where my transformation had begun. My parents attended, proud and somewhat amazed to see their daughter recognized for achievements they had never fully understood or supported during my years of struggle. In my acceptance speech, I talked about the importance of distinguishing between cultural values that strengthen families and cultural expectations that diminish individual growth. "Honoring our families doesn't require sacrificing our dreams," I said to the audience of business owners and community leaders. "Sometimes the greatest honor we can give our parents is showing them what's possible when we pursue our full potential." After the ceremony, my parents and I had dinner together at a restaurant in Chinatown. The conversation was comfortable and genuine, focused on current events and family updates rather than old grievances or unresolved tensions. They asked thoughtful questions about my work and listened with interest to my answers. "We're proud of you," my father said simply as we prepared to leave. "We don't always understand your choices, but we can see that you've built a good life." It was exactly the kind of recognition I had yearned for during my years of struggle, but receiving it now felt like a gift rather than a vindication. I no longer needed their approval to validate my decisions, which made their acknowledgement all the more meaningful. The drive back to Los Angeles felt like a completion of sorts. I had returned to the city where my journey began, received recognition for the path I had chosen, and experienced genuine connection with the family members who had once been the source of my greatest pain. The relationship wasn't perfect, but it was honest and respectful, which was more than I had ever dared to hope for. Elena and Marcus met me at the airport, excited to hear about the award ceremony and full of questions about San Francisco. As we drove home through the familiar streets of Los Angeles, I felt profound gratitude for the city that had welcomed me when I was broken and desperate, that had given me space to heal and grow and build the life I had always wanted. The house in Venice Beach felt like a sanctuary as we walked through the front door. David had prepared my favorite dinner, and the children had made congratulations cards decorated with their own artwork. The evening felt like a celebration not just of the award but of everything we had built together as a family. Later that night, as David and I sat on our back patio listening to the ocean in the distance, I reflected on the incredible journey from the scared, exhausted woman who had fled San Francisco 12 years earlier to the confident, fulfilled person I had become. Do you think you would have found this life if your family hadn't treated you so badly? David asked, understanding my reflective mood. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe I needed to experience that level of dysfunction to appreciate what healthy relationships look like. Maybe I needed to lose myself completely before I could figure out who I really was. The question was hypothetical, but it highlighted something important about resilience and growth. Sometimes our greatest wounds become our greatest sources of strength, not because the pain was necessary but because healing from it teaches us things we couldn't have learned any other way. As I sit here now, 15 years after that pivotal moment when I overheard my parents planning to sell the business I had built without including me in the decision, I can honestly say that leaving San Francisco was the best choice I ever made. Not because my family was irredeemably terrible, but because staying would have required me to remain small and self-sacrificing in ways that ultimately served no one. My children are growing into confident, compassionate individuals who understand that love is about supporting each other's growth rather than limiting each other's options. My marriage continues to be a source of joy and mutual support. My career provides both financial security and meaningful work that helps other families avoid the patterns that once trapped me. The relationship with my parents has evolved into something I never thought possible, genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared interests rather than obligation and resentment. They visit twice a year, and the time we spend together is pleasant and enriching for everyone involved, especially Elena and Marcus, who have wonderful relationships with their grandparents without any of the complicated dynamics that characterized my childhood. My siblings have also found their own paths to healthier family relationships. Michael has built a successful career in technology while maintaining close but appropriate connections with our parents. Jessica has developed financial independence and emotional maturity that have strengthened her marriage and her sense of self. The family business is thriving under different ownership, serving the community we all still care about while no longer serving as a source of conflict or exploitation within our family. Sometimes I drive past it during visits to San Francisco, pleased to see customers I remember from my years behind the counter but feeling no nostalgia for the sacrifices I made to keep it running. The most important lesson I've learned is that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Love that requires you to diminish yourself isn't love at all, it's dysfunction disguised as devotion. Real love, whether in families or romantic relationships or friendships, supports growth and celebrates individual achievement while maintaining connection and mutual care. If I could speak to the younger version of myself who was trapped in that cycle of sacrifice and disappointment, I would tell her that she deserves love that enhances rather than diminishes her life. I would tell her that family loyalty doesn't require self-destruction, that saying no to exploitation is not the same as abandoning people you care about. Most importantly, I would tell her that it's never too late to choose yourself, to build the life you want rather than the life others expect you to live. The journey isn't easy, and it requires courage to disappoint people who have become accustomed to your compliance. But the freedom and authenticity waiting on the other side of that courage is worth every difficult step along the way. Today, as I watch Elena practice piano, because she chose to resume lessons after taking a break for soccer, and Marcus build elaborate structures with his blocks, I know that they will grow up understanding their own worth. They will make mistakes and face challenges, but they will face them with the knowledge that they are loved for who they are, not for what they can provide. They will never have to choose between their dreams and their family's approval because they will understand that families who truly love you want you to flourish. They will set boundaries when necessary and pursue their goals with confidence, and if they ever find themselves in relationships that require them to sacrifice their well-being for others' comfort, they will have the tools and the courage to make different choices. This is the legacy I want to leave them, and it's the gift I want to offer anyone else who recognizes themselves in my story. You are worthy of love that celebrates your success rather than resenting it. You deserve relationships that support your growth rather than stunting it. And it's never too late to choose the life that honors your full potential, even if it means disappointing people who preferred you small and self-sacrificing. The weight of always giving nearly destroyed me, but learning to receive and to choose myself saved not just my own life but ultimately strengthened every relationship that truly mattered. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is showing them what love looks like when it's healthy, honest, and built on mutual respect rather than exploitation and obligation.